America will be the last superpower, and here is why. This video popped up on my Explorer, so I had to go ahead and check this out with you guys. Look, man, on the road to 100,000. Wow, y'all already know, 97,000 now, y'all. We getting closer by the day, y'all. Every day, I feel like we gaining close to 1,000 subs, so we almost there, y'all. We almost there. I think by the end of Jan, beginning of Feb, we will be there at our 100K goal, man. What should we do at 100K, y'all? What should we do at 100K? Let me know in the comment section below. Let's check this out, y'all.
This is a video about the most important, yet most ignored concept in world power. It's the reason some nations fall behind, while some get ahead. Why the world is so uneven in its spread of wealth and power. Every year, more and more people are asking about American decline. Maybe out of fear, maybe out of hope. Yet what none of...
Hey, we've been talking a lot about U.S. decline. Y'all see the dollar is declining, like a lot of there's been a lot of conversation on the U.S. declining, y'all.
It talks about that on a planet so random, so different, so spread out, the physical land under our feet is the ultimate constraint on what choices a country has. Why is China doing that? Why hasn't Africa caught up? Why is that place on the map always having problems? This video is brought to you by Farmland LP. Every feature of land can be positive, negative, or neutral for the country that occupies it. The big flat area stretching from Moscow to Warsaw is a negative for Russia. It's hard to defend. Germany and Napoleon walked their armies right through here. The Himalayas on China's western border shake out to be neutral, giving protection from countries on the other side, but denying China overland access to the Indian Ocean, severely limiting trade and military options. On the other side of the coin, the Mississippi River Basin has more navigable miles of river than the rest of the world put together, giving the U.S. a major surplus of food and a cheap way to transport it. Look at all these kinds of features over every country, and the ordering of the world clicks into place. So let's play a game. The first known humans evolved out of Southeast Africa, slowly spreading out across the world as they settled into the 6 cradle of civilization societies: Olmec in Mexico, Karasupe in Peru, Nile in Egypt, Mesopotamia, Indus in India, Yellow River in China. You want what every country wants: to be at peace, growing, prosperous for as long as possible. One of these original 6 did far better than the rest, with the outcome largely predetermined by the features of land around them. Knowing that, which would you choose to start as? Food is critical. A population can't grow without it. You'll of course want fresh water, something reliable and plentiful. People and your crops depend on it. A natural barrier would be welcome, something invading armies would struggle with.
The Nile.
For those that said the Nile, tell them what they've won, Bob. Yes, the 138 pyramids built in early Egypt weren't an accident. You need stability for that, and the Nile was the most stable society the world has ever known for 3 predictable reasons. 1, it had the best river, most reliable, and not flooding to a degree that every so often it kills 10% of your people, making it easy to grow food. 2, the flatness of the river made it easy to transport things from the upper down to the coast. And 3, the people floating down along the river and living by it barely had to think about an invading army, because the desert on either side was the world's best defense against the militaries of the time. No one wants to march across that much desert today, let alone 4,000 years ago. Egypt, the last of the 6 societies to be standing, made it 3,300 years. The invasion of Egypt, knocking off the last of them, kicked off the great global shuffle as the world's population began to boom, going from 200 million in year 0, 500 million by 1500, getting big enough that people are really starting to bump into one another, wanting that greener grass, kingdoms merging and splitting. Europe is one big revolving conflict. China's kingdoms war, Japan war, Africa war. By 1800, we're at 1 billion. 1945, 3 billion. And then suddenly, the math changed. Are we really going to invade them? What if they have nukes? Borders started being redrawn much slower than the previous 2,000 years. Earth's geography lottery, what it blessed and cursed nations with, became locked in, starting with the United States as governor of Earth's most enviable landmass. Stretching 1/4 of the way down the globe, glaciers from the last ice age carved deep canyons into the edge of the land they blanketed. Deep canyons on coastline are what create natural deepwater ports. One does not simply make a deepwater port. All over Europe, natural ports. All over North America, natural ports, giving Europe, whose ports, critically, didn't freeze in the winter, by far the best ship design and navies of the time. Ships and navies that could leave the ports of Europe, but then also easily land and keep landing in the natural deepwater ports of North America. New York, Boston, Philadelphia, Baltimore, quickly establishing highly productive settlements they use as a foothold to push west across North America. Ports, people, the land along the East Coast, great. But that was not what cemented the United States into an inevitable superpower. It was the Louisiana Purchase, a legal guarantee that no other European power would colonize or explore. This area of land was purchased for $340 million in today's money. But what would that piece of land be worth today? I mean, it's a truly priceless section of the United States. There is no scenario under which America would sell the middle of the country. But if you had to come up with a dollar value for it, it's worth at least $60 trillion. And I personally think that's kind of low. But $60 trillion, that would be a 17,640,000% increase on the purchase price. Thomas Jefferson taking the crown of probably the best investment anyone ever has made. So try as hard as you can, and it would still be very, very hard to overstate the importance of the Mississippi Basin. It's the best farmland the world has ever seen. It's all connected via a series of very flat navigable rivers. As I said earlier, it has more navigable miles of river than the rest of the world put together. But then it empties out into the protected Gulf of Mexico, giving the U.S. an outlet into the ocean from the middle of the country. France knew full well what they were selling. They knew the land was so good, they sold it to the U.S. to screw over England.
The sale assures forever the power of the United States, and I have given...
Bruh, and that is so powerful, y'all, because think about how easy it is for the U.S. to bring in transport and take out transport, because they have a whole... The ocean connects, and it goes right through the middle of the country, bro. Like, come on,
England a rival who sooner or later will humble her pride.
France being at war with Britain, the money was part of it, but the sale did, in fact, guarantee that in a couple of short centuries, the U.S. would surpass Britain by a lot. Building on the strong footing in the east, the U.S. used it to push out Spain and connect the Pacific Ocean to the Atlantic Ocean, forming the greatest military defense still today that exists. 3,000 miles between the constantly warring Europeans and 4,500 miles from Asia. This Great Blue Buffer is the main reason the U.S. is the only highly developed country that hasn't had to rebuild over the last 150 years. Great. The U.S. has all this cool land, and here's where it all comes together. Relative to what? The power games nations play, the great game as some call it, is largely based on what the land under each country allows them to do relative to other countries. So here are 4 very specific examples of how major countries lack the geographic power of the United States.
Okay.
China has access to just one ocean, the Pacific, and that access is gated by the Philippines, Japan, and Taiwan, and the rest of the countries that border the South China Sea. All mostly unfriendly to China, which historically has left the country in a bad spot in times of conflict. All of its trade passes within an easy plane's distance of an unfriendly country, and 80% of its oil goes through the Malacca Strait, a very narrow choke point. So for the past 2 decades and tens of billions of dollars, China has been working very hard to secure overland access to a second ocean, the Indian Ocean, trying to connect the Karakoram Highway to a deepwater port in southern Pakistan, and rail and pipeline over the West Mountains to the coast of Myanmar. These are the only 2 ways China may ever be able to drive a truck from within its borders and load the cargo it carries onto a ship, making China's military position, offensive and defensive, relatively poor compared to the expansive ocean access provided by the Atlantic, Gulf, and Pacific coasts of the U.S. 4 times the size of Europe, the second largest continental population after Asia. Africa's promise has been so high for so long that the struggle of the continent to field a country able to work up through the global rankings seems to defy logic. Huge natural resource wealth, but the rivers, the coast, it is all working against the continent. Nobody has ever run the Congo River from top to bottom. 1,600 miles from the headwaters, it reaches the Atlantic Ocean here. Right here is where everyone who's tried has quit. 10 miles long, up to 4.5 miles wide, and littered with 20-foot standing waves, building-sized rocks, and whirlpools that look like they're out of a cartoon. 90 miles from where the river meets the ocean, Inga Rapids marks the end of the Congo River in its usefulness to Congo's place in the world. Sir H.M. Stanley of
Dr. Livingston, I presume,
after trying to run the whole thing but quitting at Inga Rapids, called it an immense tragedy, depriving the entire interior
And this is actually... I don't think we ever thought about how terrain and the way that the continents are built and the surrounding areas play a part in the power of the country, bruh. You know, we always think about like the currency, you know what I'm saying, the people, the resources on the continent, but we don't think about, you know what I'm saying, the trades and how, you know what I'm saying, the land or the oceans, or, you know what I'm saying, how those things play a factor in providing for those countries, bruh. Like
Africa,
I never really
two-thirds the
thought
size
about
of
it in
mainland
this,
US, from the thing that
you know?
all great powers need to become and stay great, a reliable flow of water that lets boats go from the interior of the country to the ocean. If you were to cut away all the ground so you could see the Congo River from the side, how it drops from its headwaters to where it reaches the ocean, this massive step is revealed. This is the Mississippi for comparison, a boat-friendly paradise. But even if the Congo was as flat as the Mississippi, it would run into one of the worst stretches of land on the entire planet for natural deepwater harbors. Untouched by glaciers, the coast of Africa is remarkably smooth. Few jagged indentations, too smooth. You see how the Chesapeake Bay is all jagged like this? It is perfect for trade. But these don't really exist on the coast of Africa. The continent, get this, has 20% of all the land on the planet, but because the coast is so smooth, very few indentations, it has less than 5% of the world's coastline. Europe has 7% of the land, 16% of the coastline. But to make things more difficult, the smoothness doesn't do much to slow or break up the energy of the open ocean like a jagged coast does. It slams into the continent, creating one of the most powerful ocean currents in the world very close to shore, currents that sweep up the sediment West Africa's two rivers bring to the ocean and spread it out into any indentation where it can fit, like the few natural harbors Africa does have, which makes the task of keeping African ports open, deep enough for large ships, free from sandbars and shoals that are constantly forming, drifting, reforming, dredging it all away is a Sisyphean task that wasn't possible to do before sophisticated machinery. Africa never stood a chance to be one of the premier continents for trade once the oceans became the way goods are moved around the world. Russia sits in the middle of two crushing geographic puzzles. The first is what we're seeing in Ukraine. This area of land is so flat that it keeps Russia's generals up at night. Not once, but twice over the last 200 years, a European army has marched right up to Moscow. Napoleon captured it. But even if Russia did control that whole run of land, it still lacks the thing any true superpower must have: multiple deep, warm water ports that are attached to its mainland. To get to the Atlantic, Russia either has to use its one port in the north of the country, go through the choke point of the Baltic and through the Danish Straits, or down through Turkey, through the Mediterranean, and out into the Atlantic. This is why Russia absolutely loves the idea of the polar ice caps melting a little bit further. If the north coast of Russia can stay warm enough year-round, its north coast becomes a bastion of deep-water ports the length of its north coastline, which is very long. Russia's meddling in the Middle East is in part to gain permanent access to a warm water port. They had their eye on the same port in Pakistan that China is currently trying to link to when they invaded Afghanistan in the 1970s. Very cozy with Syria on the western shore of the Mediterranean. Now, maybe Putin loves the Syrians, but more likely because the Assad regime had been for decades granting Russia complete and total access to their one major port. A wonderfully strategic spot right above the Suez Canal. Russia's ships are allowed to come and go as they please. And yes, England, the textbook case of how technology can change everything. One of the reasons it was a world superpower for so long was because it's an island, 360-degree access to the ocean. It had a natural gap between constantly warring Europe and easy access to the flow of world trade. But this was the day Britain's fate was sealed.
And here's the giant air armada Hitler hurls at England.
Planes. Flight changed the math from hours to slowly creep across the English Channel and invade by boat to 30 minutes for hundreds of bombers to be over downtown London. That made Britain susceptible, once again, to be invaded by, I'll only say it one more time, constantly warring Europe. From that point forward, the security of the US, surrounded by its two oceans, made keeping money in US dollars instead of the British pound obviously a safer bet. The reserve currency switched, causing money to flow out of Britain and into the US. There were other things leading up to Britain's fall, but the arrival of the Air Force was the decisive nail in the coffin. Napoleon was right. On a scale of 1 to 10, only one country today ranks a 10 for the three most important questions. Can you feed your people? Can you be invaded? Can you trade? Everything else builds on that. Politics, the economy, culture, it all must sprout from the land upon which it sits. That does not mean it's the only or single determining factor, not at all. But it is the point to start from. So when we ask, is America in decline? The first mention of American decline that I could find was back in 1930. Yet here we are, almost 100 years later, because the idea that the US is going to spontaneously collapse ignores the thing that's guided human civilization since the beginning of time. Until something about the land underneath a nation changes, that country's position of power in the world is unlikely to change. Organic food keeps growing, but less than 1% of US...
And that's crazy, bro, because I don't think a lot of us ever thought of it that way. You know what I'm saying?
Farmland
The
is
U.S.
sort of-
Now that I look at it, the U.S. is in a perfect spot. Like, it's surrounded by most of the oceans. You know what I'm saying? And then it has the Mississippi that runs right through into the ocean that makes it even easier to transport goods when, bruh. Come on,
Organic,
fam.
that's where Farmland LP, the sponsor of today's episode, comes in.
Okay, we ain't gonna stay here for the sponsor. Let me know what you guys think, man. Have you ever thought it from this point of view? You know what I'm saying? Is this something new to y'all as well? This is something totally new for me. You know what I'm saying? I never thought of it from this point of view. So let me know what your guys' thoughts are. You know what I'm saying? Comment them down below. Hope you guys enjoy my reaction commentary. Look, on the road to 100,000. Wow. Stay tuned my next video, y'all.